It's safe to assume that Seattle is the only American city with a nearly forgotten sailing ship buried below its downtown streets. At 5:45 p.m. on December 30th, 1876, the Windward ran aground at Whidbey Island's useless bay, having mistaken a beach fire for the Admiralty Point lighthouse during what a keeper called a perfect gale. Hauling 525,000 board feet of lumber from James Colman's mill on Seattle's waterfront, the 650-ton bark was bound for San Francisco, helmed by Captain A.E. Williams with a crew of 15. Williams, wrote the Puget Sound Dispatch, returned to Seattle by canoe on New Year's Day with grim news. The Windward, he reported, is now lying dismasted and on her beam ends about a mile from the beach. Owned by Colman, known for Colman Dock, and partners, the vessel was only partially insured, although most of its cargo was saved. Declared a complete loss, the Windward was towed back to Seattle and deposited on tide flats. And for years to come, its distinctive oak hull photobombed panoramic portraits of Seattle's waterfront. Colman used it for storage and allegedly maintained a pied-à-mer in its deck cabins. One day, teenaged Charles Kinnear, whose father George donated Queen Anne Hill's Kinnear Park to Seattle, swam to the hulk at low tide. "We boys tore copper from her bottom and dived from her decks," he later recalled. Though the tall masts had long disappeared, they provided, Kinnear said, many souvenir canes for local dandies. On occasion, the derelict hosted festivities. On July 2nd, 1877, the Daily Intelligencer suggested walking a greased pole for a $10 prize off the old bark Windward will be very amusing. In the late 1880s, with the filling in of then Railroad Avenue, today's Alaskan Way, the vessel was buried intact. Debris from the 1889 Great Seattle Fire extended the fill. Every few decades since then, Seattle historians remembered the Windward's underground presence. Clarence Bagley in 1901 reminded readers of the dismantled craft that still lies in the mud on Western Avenue, with her stern projecting into Marion Street. In 1949, Seattle Times columnist C.T. Conover reimagined it under the same streets, throbbing with modern traffic, its bow pointed toward the harbor as if eager to revisit scenes of its former glory. And in 1982, our own Paul Dorpat whimsically suggested that the Windward no longer sways with the tides, but permanently jaywalks below Western Avenue. Today, aiming time's arrow once again, we encourage waterfront visitors to take a dreamy breath and envision Seattle's buried maritime treasure beneath their feet. In our first then photo, this 1877 north-looking panorama of Seattle's waterfront features the Windward, at center left, on tide flats where it still rests underground today. At upper right, the impressive Pike Street Wharf and coal bunker can be seen near today's aquarium. Photographers Henry and Louis Peterson likely captured this view from the back porch of their Cherry Hill studio. In our second then photo, originally built in 1853 in Bath, Maine, the Windward regularly rounded Cape Horn until 1872, when it became a coaster, plying the Seattle to San Francisco route. In this zoomed-in detail from an 1878 Peterson Brothers panorama, original deck cabins can be seen. In our first now photo, from atop a 10-story garage, much of the waterfront is obscured by tall buildings. State ferries can be seen departing from Colman Dock. The Windward's location is near the center of the photo. In our second now photo, standing at the intersection of Marion and Western, maritime historians Michael Meldie and Stefan Edwin Lundgren indicate the Windward's likely location. In our last now photo, the Windward's original bell was donated to the Museum of History and Industry in 1982 by Isabel Colman Pierce, granddaughter of James Colman. Its sweet sound called generations of Colmans to supper.